Nobody likes to be wrong. In fact, we avoid it at all costs. This is especially true when it comes to being wrong about spiritual things. But this can be tricky if our spiritual impressions are largely based on feelings. The truth of the matter is our feelings can be wrong. In this episode, we're going to explore together a more well-rounded approach to interpreting our spiritual impressions so that we can be better seekers of truth. I'm Anthony Sweat, and this is Seekers Wanted. So a number of years ago, a pastor from another faith and I were having a friendly discussion. And I mean, it was a friendly discussion. We were trying to understand each other and where we were coming from. He said something that was really interesting to me. He said, "I don't like how your missionaries try to get people to join your church." And when I asked him what he meant by that, he said, "Your missionaries tell people to rely solely on their feelings." And he said, "And your feelings can be totally off." I actually agreed with him. We had a really interesting experience where I took him to Alma 32. I tried to show him out of that chapter where Alma says, if you're experiencing the Spirit of God, it will influence your mind, it will influence your heart, but it will also produce certain things in your life. And that when people join the church, it's because they're usually seeing those three things happening in their life. I call this the tripod of truth. When you and I try to interpret the Holy Ghost only through what we feel, we have to be really careful. As a matter of fact, there was an interesting study that was done by the National Institute of Science where they followed some judges around who were ruling on people's parole, whether they should let people out of jail. You would think that if they were dealing with people's life in prison, that they would base this on facts, objectivity, data. It's not true. What the study found was the thing that influenced whether they did or didn't grant parole was the time of day that they were ruling on the case. They found they were more lenient in the morning after they had eaten food and their blood sugar was good. They found they were stricter and harsher right before lunch. Then lo and behold, after lunch, they paroled more people. But as the day wore on and it got closer to the end of the day, they paroled less people. This wasn't based on facts and what should be right or wrong. This was based on feelings, and their feelings were being affected by nothing other than probably their blood sugar. The reality is they were probably just hungry. As a matter of fact, they were probably hangry. So let's talk about how this could affect you and I in seeking spiritual truth. It's a really common thing in the church. I mean, really common. You've heard it, and so have I, that you'll hear people say, "I just feel really strongly about this." You'll be sitting in a church meeting or a class, and someone will raise their hand, and they're like, "But I just feel really strongly," as though it's a trump card that is the Holy Ghost. That's not what the scriptures tend to teach you and I about how the Holy Ghost operates. It's one part of a three-part stool. Doctrine and Covenants section 8 verses 2 and 3 says this, "Yea, behold, I will tell you in your mind and in your heart by the Holy Ghost, which shall come upon you. Now, behold, this is the spirit of revelation." Just a few sections later in Doctrine and Covenants 11, the Lord then says, not just your mind and your heart, but listen to this. This is section 11, verse 12. "And now, verily, verily, I say unto thee, put your trust in that Spirit which leadeth to do good, yea, to do justly, to walk humbly, to judge righteously, and this is my Spirit." So from those two simple sections of the Doctrine and Covenants, it's taught us that the Holy Ghost will speak to our mind and our heart, but it will also produce certain fruits or outcomes, results in our lives that are consistent with God's will. This brings us back to what I called the tripod of truth at the beginning of this video. So imagine that truth is sitting on a table. If truth is resting on a table that only has one leg, that's a pretty precarious table to be resting things on. If you and I rely on our feelings only, we can get off base, we can fall. However, if we add a second leg, and now truth is resting on two legs, that's a little more stable. We might add our thoughts to that, so we have our feelings and our thoughts. But if we add a third leg to the stool, that of the fruits or the outcomes, the results, now truth is resting on a well-balanced tripod. This third leg of the stool is what I believe to be the most crucial leg. If you and I only look at feelings and thoughts, but not what those feelings and thoughts produce, that's where people get deceived and led astray. So here's some things to ask yourself. What is it producing in my life? Is it producing the fruits of the Spirit? Is it producing things like love, peace, joy, happiness? And not just personal happiness, personal joy. We're talking about gospel joy. Joy in the covenant. That's one of the biggest questions about the fruits that you and I should always ask ourselves. Is it leading me to make and keep sacred covenants with my Father in heaven and to follow His Son, Jesus Christ? Anything that invites and entices us to do that is from God, whether it's certain feelings or thoughts. That's why the product matters so much, because it can help us avoid being wrong when it comes to spiritual things. And frankly, spiritual things are what matter most in the lens of eternity. So the next time you have a spiritual impression, ask yourself, is this coming to my mind and my heart? And is it helping me to make and keep sacred covenants with my Father in heaven and His Son, Jesus Christ? That will help you and I be better seekers of truth.